Hello friends and welcome to Fire Emblem Discussion. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not the next game in the series will be a new game entirely or a remake of an older one. We're going to look at both sides of the argument, which one I think is going to happen, which one I want to happen, and then in the end I'm going to ask you what you guys think and what you think and you want or think will happen as far as the next game in the series. So to start off, just to get it out of the way, what do I want? And I think personally I would love a remake of Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Let's find out. Let's talk about that and really come to a conclusion for ourselves. And, of course, leave your comments below. A new game would need to change up quite a bit for me to consider it a good / successful successor to Fire Emblem Three Houses. So I would personally be upset if we went back to a school setting. But then how are they going to handle all of the customization and things that we had in Three Houses? Because if we lose much of that, I think a lot of fans would be disappointed as well, and they know fans love that stuff. So if the next game isn't a remake, I think they need to be careful and with the new game, whether it is replace the setting but still keep the training aspects, which you could easily do, even if you made it like a mercenary company or something like a la FE9. But you wanted them to, they had like training days and training time instead of like teaching time. That could work totally fine. Me personally, that's what I would prefer. I'd like a change of scenery, but I'm sure a lot of people like the school setting. And it works well until the time skip. It feels a little awkward that it's still that way, you know? It feels a little weird that that's still what they do. But otherwise, it's a fun time, and I appreciate the school setting for what it is. But I hope that they use the Three Houses engine, but they move on to changing things to like. Now I think if we get a remake, I think there are three games that have a decent possibility of being remade. Those games being Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War, Fire Emblem 6 The Binding Blade, and Fire Emblem 9 Path of Radiance. Fire Emblem 9 being the least likely to be remade, in my opinion, because it's the most recent it has of those three. It's the most recent of those three, and it already plays really well, and I'd be fine. I'm fine without a remake, essentially. I think there's a lot of challenges that would come from a remake for any of the three. Like FE4, there's the huge maps, and I feel like they need to address that for the general public. Whereas, like me as a classic Fire Emblem fan, and many of you who listen, FE4 would be fine the way it is. If they updated the graphics and maybe made a few things less cryptic, story-wise, and then like just add supports and the like, we would be happy. But I don't think FE4 is going to reach mainstream appeal if it does that. So I do wonder if they'll need to cut up the maps to keep it more interesting, to keep people engaged in the story itself and keep people engaged in the gameplay. I personally would be pretty sad about it. I love the big maps. It's what makes FE4 to me. It's what makes Genealogy of the Holy War unique compared to other games in the series. And if you take that away, it loses something special. Another thing is the trading system, item system, where every single unit in Genealogy of the Holy War has their own inventory, their own convoy, and their own supply of gold or currency. And the only way to like share items is to sell them to the pawn shop in a town, and then have another character go to that pawn shop and buy it, right? And that way, that's the only way of really like trading money or trading items around. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic, and it allows for the game to be, it allows each character to be even more unique than they are in other games, and it gives them like their own story, their own like personal weapons, like. I don't know, say, and it's easy to trade them around if you really want to, it's not a big deal, but say, Sigurd has the silver sword that he gets in the first chapter. It'd be super nice if you could trade that around and have more people use it, but it becomes like Sigurd's silver sword that he passes on to Seliph, and it becomes Selif's silver sword. Story-wise, it's really cute, and so it's a nice little touch, that's like, oh, that was Selif's father's sword. It's a great touch that way. And I think if they change that, I would personally be disappointed. That's one thing that I don't want to see changed. But that's one thing that I think would need to be streamlined at the very least a little bit. And there's ways they could do that. Maybe they could make it so units can sell directly to one another rather than going through the pawn shop. or whatever else, so that it's not as I don't know, unintuitive. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. It's not an easy thing to grasp for people who've played other Fire Emblem games in the series. But I think it would be a rough thing to change for the game itself because it's so balanced around it. But I think FE4 has an amazing story. It's on a really grand scale, like this entire continent engulfing war, and like evil gods and other gods trying to stop the evil gods, and crazy crusader weapons that are just like superhuman abilities. Basically, they become demigods when they use these weapons. There's just really fun concepts and things to play around with. And of course, there is the, I guess, like the quote-unquote romancing aspect of it, right? That a lot of people would be into. And making the pairings for the second generation. And they could really add some supports in there to make it really flesh out characters. Full voice acting would be so cool for that game as well. FE4 has the bones to make, I think, the best remake of the three we're going to talk about today. I think it has the bones to make like the skeletal structure to be an amazing game, to take what Three Houses has done and use it in Genealogy of the Holy War and really move forward with it. It could be amazing, honestly. Next, let's talk about Fire Emblem 6, which is Binding Blade. It's the game that Roy is from, Roy from Super Smash Bros. And I personally don't think this game needs a remake. I think it plays just fine the way it is. The only reason it really would need to be remade is for a proper English translation and a proper way to play it in English and internationally, because it was both that and FE4 were Japan exclusive, right? I think FE6 would really benefit from some more colorful writing, and especially some more accessible supports, a more accessible support system that is lacking in that game. I mean, there are supports there, but grinding them is it's near impossible to get those without grinding for supports and really trying for them. They don't happen naturally like they do in the newer games, and I think they would need to change that. Some people have asked for like an FE7 FE6 combo, a combo game, and have it be like one generation to a second generation, because a lot of the characters are related by either like their children or siblings or whatever else, and you could have some changes go along with what character pairings you did in FE7 for FE6, and that could be an interesting way to go about it. But I think both games stand alone too well, and I don't think you need both games. I think that's a pretty pointless thing to do, and I hope they don't go that route. I doubt they will, because they'll get more money by just re-releasing, by doing two different games, right? So I think FE6 honestly probably has the best chance of being remade. The guy who worked on Fire Emblem Gaiden, I don't know if he's the project director or producer or whatever else. The guy that worked on, sorry, not Gaiden, the Fire Emblem Echoes remake of Gaiden, he has expressed interest in Fire Emblem The Binding Blade, and Roy is super popular all over the world because of Super Smash Brothers, and which is funny because in game he's actually kind of a wuss. he's not a very good unit. So it's like really funny that he's like this extremely popular character. So I think FE6 is slightly more likely than FE4. I mean, they could add some quality of life things to FE6 as well. I don't know. I could see them adding all sorts of stuff, because honestly, FE6 is about as bare bones Fire Emblem as you get. Similar to like Fire Emblem 1. Honestly, it is so bare bones. There aren't very many new mechanics that were added to the game. There really aren't any new mechanics that were added to the game compared to like FE5. Oh, and as a side note, I don't think FE5 can't be remade before FE4. That's just that can't happen. And I don't think the combo game where they put them together is ever going to happen. The games are too different, too many different mechanics. It just wouldn't work. Personally, I wouldn't want that. And now let's move on to FE9. FE9, I think, honestly, could really benefit from a lot of speed up. It could benefit from turn skipping, but other than that, the game plays so well. I actually played it for a couple hours on stream today, and Path of Radiance holds up so well. It is such a fun game. The story's great. The only thing that is accessibility. I mean, it's not a cheap game to find, and I understand that. So it'd be nice if it was remade for a modern console. But other than that, I don't think it needs to be remade. FE9 is really, really good and well made. So those are the three that I see talked about the most about being remade next. And I think all of them have some merit to being remastered and re-released and remade. But I think FE6 is the most likely. I think FE4 comes after that, and FE9. And that's all just based on previous things that have been said by directors and producers and then people who've worked on the game. But if I'm looking at Three Houses, I think FE4 is the next one. Because I feel like Three Houses took between Crest compared to Holy Blood, and the monastery is basically just the town from FE4. And all sorts of other things. I feel like there is definitely some crossover in ideas, and Three Houses definitely feeds into the idea of a Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War remake. So that's what I think. I don't know. I think it's a toss up between FE6 and FE4 at this point. I could see both being really popular and really successful. My personal hopes, I hope it's FE4, but let me know in the comments what you think. And let me know what you think will happen and what you want to happen. And before we go, real quick, I think we will find out what the next game in the series is going to be next year. I think next year at E3, it's either going to be at E3 next year or a Nintendo Direct later in the summer, like in August or maybe even September actually, that we will find out the next game in the series, what the next game in the series is going to be. For now, I think they're too focused on Three Houses and the DLC that'll be coming out both by the end of this year and like next spring. So I think we need to wait until that's all done before we even talk about the next Fire Emblem, as far as like what it is and when it'll come out. But even then, that's basically less than a year away, I think, and it's going to be some really great news, and I'm super excited to find out what it is. But yeah, again, leave your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think, and like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys next time.